Okay, our second speaker tonight is Colin Storey, Safety and Quality Advisor from Kurnell Desalination Plant, formerly Principal Chemist at the Woronora Water Filtration Plant. And he'll speak about water filtration and desalination processes. Surprise, surprise. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks for inviting me along tonight. This presentation will be a little different from Grace's, but hopefully it will be as interesting to you. As Kim said, I've been at Woronora. I was at Woronora Dam filtration plant for the past 20 odd years, and I've spent the last 2 years, a year and a half actually, down at Kurnell. So there's a little bit of background there. So what I'm going to do is just talk about general water filtration treatment, particularly at Woronora Dam, and then a little bit about what we do at the desal plant at the moment. So most of you, I imagine, would be familiar with Woronora Dam, the water filtration plant down there. It feeds from the dam itself, which has a catchment area of about 75 square kilometres. The dam was built back in the Depression, back in the 30s and 40s. The filtration plant was built back in 1995. There are a number of basic treatment processes that we have down there where we do, we add ferric chloride and polydadmac, and that causes coagulation and flocculation. That gets caught on filters, and then we disinfect it with chlorine and ammonia. So the ammonia is a way of producing a long-term effect on the disinfection. So chlorine is used to kill any bacteria in the water. The ammonia and the chlorine combines to give another chloramines, and that is used to maintain the disinfection during the travelling down the pipelines. So as I said, 75 square kilometres, volume of water is about 781,000 megalitres. It's currently about 86% full at the moment, and currently has probably the best water quality in the Sydney network at the moment, I believe. So I've gone through that. The dam water itself, because it's in a sandstone area, it's very, very soft. And you know, that will, when you use soap with that sort of water, it'll foam up very badly, can cause some problems, and it also causes problems in the Sydney water network with the pipes. The pipes are concrete lined, and if you run very soft water through the concrete lined pipes, eventually they'll dissolve, and that can cause some issues for Sydney water. So we have to add lime and carbon dioxide to the water to bring it up to a level where it is in balance with the concrete and the pipes, and it doesn't dissolve the concrete and doesn't actually precipitate within the pipelines. That would give the opposite effect.
Soft water. What is soft water?
Soft water means it's very pure. It doesn't have many minerals in it. Seawater is very hard, full of salt. So that's the other extreme. That's just a rough picture of the Sydney water network with the dams. The dams are run by Water New South Wales. Sydney Water actually runs the pipes. The big one is Warragamba Dam, and Woronora is sitting all by itself over about in the middle of the right-hand side there. So it doesn't have a backup system from anywhere else, and it's the sole source of supply to Helensburgh, but primarily supplies Woronora, the Southern Shire. So within the Woronora system, there's 15 reservoirs, about 1,000 kilometres of pipeline, and average use up till recently was about 470 litres per person per day. Water can be shared. There's a big reservoir at Sutherland which can accept water from either Woronora and Warragamba. At the moment, the Shire is being supplied pretty much by Woronora, but usually most of it comes from Warragamba. But at the moment, the Warragamba water is still suffering from the heavy rains and the bushfires that we had earlier, so the water quality there is not as good as it could be. So we have a number of mechanisms for treating the water actually within the dam. There is a risk that with in any dam, any body of water, you can get stratification, which results in low oxygen levels at the bottom of the water, at the bottom of the dam. And if it wasn't aerated, you can see just here there's looks like a big spar bar that actually runs all the way along there. What it does is it's a bubbling system, a compressor that pumps air into the dam, causes the water to turn over, and keeps the water well mixed and keeps the oxygen levels quite high, so you don't get a problem with iron or manganese dissolving in the water. Which then, if it did, got through the system, got into the pipes. As soon as you did your washing and you put in an alkaline detergent, you'd get precipitation of the manganese, which would make your washing black. So that's another problem to Sydney water. That's one of the reasons that they introduced that, and also the treatment process can remove some levels of the metals as well. But that's the best way of doing it, just by running air through the system. We use a system called direct filtration, where, as I said, we add iron and polydamnate to the water, and that collects all of the particles, any floating material, fine particles in the water, makes them bigger, then they get trapped on the filters that we have at the plant. There is other types of treatment as well, membrane filtration as well, and the reverse osmosis system, which we use at the Kurnell Desalination Plant as well. As I mentioned, chlorine is used for disinfecting the water, and chlorination is used as well. At both plants, the water that we produce at both plants has to be able to mix, so we have to use the same sorts of disinfection and same levels of chlorine and ammonia in the system to so you don't get any problems when they do mix in the pipelines. That gives you a bit of background about the levels in the raw water in the dam. As I said, the levels are quite low, but we have to bring them up to higher concentrations to make them combine with the dam. Sorry, that was wrong direction. So the dam has, or the treatment plant has a contract with Sydney Water to meet certain parameters. So we can have water which is very dirty, and 3 NTUs, which doesn't look dirty, but if you had it in a glass of water, you would notice that it was it had fine particles in it. But the risk with dirty water like that is you can have bacteria attached to it, and that is something that none of us want, because that can obviously cause the disease. And this is the main reason that the treatment plants are there, is to allow or produce drinking quality water, which is available to everyone in the city. The catchment's undeveloped and protected, so there's no access to the public, and there is, as you would expect, a very good selection of animals and plants in that area. It's a real refuge, and just driving to work on a typical day, you're usually likely to see a wallaby or two on the road. I've seen echidnas, I've seen lyrebirds. There's lots of animals around there that are quite well protected. That's an aerial shot of the treatment plant when it was first built. If you did that now, you would hardly see anything, because of the 20-odd years that it's been there, we have just sort of seeded a lot of trees, and the whole place is quite different now. It's currently, the contract with Sydney Water goes to 2036. The plant, as I mentioned, we're currently doing 80 megs a day, but the design capacity is 160 megawatts a day. So that's roughly 160 swimming pools, 160 million swimming pools. No, that's not right, 160 swimming pools a day going through the system. We're currently doing 80 swimming pools a day. Yeah. That's just a rough process diagram. So you've got the dam there, where it gets pumped into a mixing chamber, where we add various chemicals, then it gets filtered and then disinfected, and we have two 10 milliliter storage tanks at the back of the plant, and they just are full of water. And when Sydney Water wants it, they open the valves and they take the water. It's all gravity fed from the plant down somewhere. I mentioned before, we add lime and carbon dioxide to the water for it to combine easily with the other water from Warragamba and wherever else it has to mix with from the desal plant as well. We have the lime is stored in silos, so we get the lime from the ruin and oil. Okay, with each of the treatments in the treatment plant can be seen as barriers. So each barrier reduces the risk of any pathogen passing through the system. So we have a number of different barriers. I think there are effectively 4 barriers, and that reduces each barrier can reduce about 90. It goes from 90 to 95 to 90% reduction of particles and bacteria in the system. So the treatment plant, filtration is a barrier, disinfection is another barrier as well, and the actual physical treatment in the dam itself is also another form of treatment that we have. I won't spend too much time with that. I'll just move on to other. So they're basically the chemicals that we use and the storage area where they are, all undercover. And if there's a spill or anything like that, it gets trapped in or collected in an abundant area and will be captured in a 20,000 litre tank underground, which we then have to pump out. That's the filter block, so we have 9 of those at the plant. The plant can run on probably half that if necessary at the moment, but each one of those spikes basically will run for about 30 or 40 hours and then get backwashed to get the dirt that it's collected out of the system. That gets used elsewhere and then stored elsewhere, and then the filter will then commence operation again, and it's all automatic. We have 5 operators who work at the plant, and they spend their time just making sure things are working properly, monitoring the analyzers, and ensuring valves and pumps and gearboxes are oiled properly as well. The filters have coal, what we use, 1.7 metres of anthracite, 0.3 metres of sand, and then 0.4 metres of gravel below that. The water actually goes down either side here, and then it's filtered, goes into a collecting channel, and then stored in the larger tanks that we have at the end of the plant. When the backwash occurs, the water comes back up and goes down through the gullet in the middle and down to the backwash system. They're the 2 clear water tanks that the water is stored in. The chemistry there. This is the chlorine that we have, 8 grams of chlorine that we have on site at any one time. It's like 2 large tanks. So there's a connection between 4 of the tanks, and that's constantly operating. And then when that's finished, it automatically flips over to the next 4, and that will usually last us about a month. So the backwash water, as I said, we collect the dirty water from the system that gets stored in this tank here temporarily, and then it runs into another couple of tanks here that we call thickeners. So we add more polymer to that thickens it from, in this point, it's about 0.2% solids. This thickens it to about 2% solids. And then we have centrifuges that thicken it to about 10% solids. So that is really like mud at that stage. It's very sloppy. Can't really do too much with it at that stage. The water that's taken from the solids then gets recycled back to the head of the plant and is run through the system again. The sludge that we collect goes down to our other plant at Wollongong, and it's then dried to about 40% solids and then recycled. We use that for beneficial reuse. So we have a contractor that comes in, collects it out of the drying beds, and packages it up and sells it to landscapers. So we don't have, and we use probably, I guess we produce at the moment 2 bins a day, 10 tonnes. So that's about 20 dry tonnes a week solids coming out of the plant. This is where they go to Illawarra, and they just sit there to dry for probably a year till they get to the right sort of consistency that we can remove. So these are what we have to meet. It's a bit of a target, so we have to meet less than 0.1. So again, it doesn't mean very much, but that's probably about the clarity you can see in an Olympic swimming pool. It's quite clear. You can see a long way through it. Colour targets, treated water, and so on. Bacteria, obviously, we have to have 0 levels of that. If we detect anything, then we have to report Sydney Water, but that really is necessary because the system has those barriers in there which stop that happening. We have online monitoring. We have a number of systems which are constantly monitoring the plants, so for fluoride, chlorine, acidity, pH. And we have a feedback system so that the system is smart, and if for some reason the pH deviates or the chlorine deviates, the system will actually recognise that from these analyzers and increase it to back to the right level again. That's called a SCADA system, so self supervising control and data acquisition. And that's the view, the control room at Woronora, and that's the view out the window looking over at the dam. Wasn't a bad place to work. And through that door there is the laboratory, which we do a lot of work online, on site to make sure that the water is tested and high quality before it goes out. This is what we look at to see what's happening. So this is the overview SCADA screen. The water comes in through here, and you see all these figures in here. They're all monitored so we know what's happening at any stage. And there are multiple layers beneath this that we can look at if we need to. So we do daily testing on at least 20 separate tests on the raw and clear water to make sure that it meets the criteria and meets the contractual requirements. We also do 600 monthly tests, 6 monthly testing on over 200 different parameters, organics, inorganics, heavy metals, plus the major ones. As I said, the water can't contain any bacteria, E. coli or total coliforms. Sydney Water does separate monitoring on the system as well to make sure that when it gets into the network, that the water maintains its high quality. The risks that we have at the site, that picture is from the dam wall. Actually not the dam. The dam wall is actually around the corner there. This is just the edge of the dam. And it's probably about 30%, 40% at that level. And probably around about 40%, about 40% of water in there, I guess. So climate change is obviously a risk. For some reason, the dam is in this spot where the rain comes out and it seems to go around the dam. And we just, sometimes it misses us completely and the rest of Sydney has a deluge. If the dam level ever gets to 10%, then it would be reserved for Helensburgh only. Bushfires back in 2001, the plant was offline for 3 days. Back then, a fire went through and just destroyed the power lines coming in. So we had no power at all, and we were running on generators for a little while after that as well. So the water security in Australia is a major concern. As you know, due to population growth, we have severe droughts and limited amounts of fresh water in this country. Global warming is obviously another issue as well. Environmental degradation of rivers due to reduced environmental flows, and the competition from grazing and irrigation for urban water supplies. That's just a couple of images there. That was back in 2006 on the left here, and that was 2015. So that's the same. That device there is the pontoon in the middle of the dam, and that's the same one there, taken from roughly the same place. So solutions to future risks. So we have the risk of shortage of water. So we can either improve our water conservation, or we can have an additional water supply. We also have the risk of dirty water, which can be quite serious as well. Again, could need an additional alternative supply, and desalination could be part of the solution. Well, in fact, it is part of the solution at the moment. So that's, you probably are aware of the plant down at Kurnell. This is the front door. It was built back in 2010. That's an aerial shot looking at, from looking towards the south, the Kurnell Peninsula, Tower Point in the background over here. This is the downlying area. But this area here is the desalination plant. That land goes back that far. So effectively, it's built to be expanded as well. So there are spaces here for an extra tank, an extra pre-treatment units as well. And this is the reverse osmosis building where all the action happens. You may remember there was a bit of controversy while it was being built and when it was first operating. So it had to run for a year just to prove that it could produce the water that it was designed to do. But then it was mothballed from 2012 to 2019 because the dams were all full. We had a tornado there, which you may remember back in 2015. Clean up afterwards, and reconstruction took 3 years. That's just a view of the RO building roof. So just go back a slide or two. So that building here, that photo that I just showed was taken from about here at the top, looking that way. So it was just totally ripped to shreds, basically. It's amazing no one was killed. We didn't have many contractors on site at the time, but one fellow was in that building, and I understand he heard it coming, dived into a pit, and phoned his family and just said, "I may not see you again." In the admin building, it was. We had everyone in the admin building, and people were just lying under desks and behind the reception desk to try and stay away from it all. It's really frightening to watch the video. So the plant's designed to do 250 megalitres a day, so that's about 250 Olympic swimming pools. Currently, at the moment, we're operating 50 meg, which is really just idling to keep everything running as if it's needed to be of assistance in the future. So it's in a position where we can provide an immediate supply of Sydney water, should it be needed, for if the water is dirty in the dams, or if they need additional water when they're doing repair works in other areas. So just a comparison between the dam water and seawater. So typically we can get dam water up to 3 NTUs, but can get as high as 10 or even higher. I believe the water at Woronora is much higher than that at the moment. Seawater typically is much more stable, so it's around less than 1 to 4 NTU. We got up to 4 during the last rainstorm. And that's basically water coming out of Botany Bay and going south. So again, true colour, and the metals are all quite low. That's just where all the buildings are. So it's a different angle. But one thing we do have, which is quite interesting, is the conservation area, which runs all the way around here. It's 15 hectares, and it's shows remnant, or contains remnant vegetation from the Kurnell Peninsula, and we've been working to try and resurrect that, which I'll talk about a bit later. Again, this is just a typical process diagram. So we go from the inlet tunnel, which is about 4 kilometres off the coast, goes into the shaft, into the plant. We have some core screenings, which remove any fish that might happen to get through. The pre-treatment is very similar to the Woronora pre-treatment, so we use coal again, and ferric chloride and so on. Then we take that water and we treat it again with through another sort of filter, and then the reverse osmosis filtration at the end. And then again, then we have to add everything that we've just taken out. So we add lime, we add carbon dioxide, we add fluoride, we add the chlorine and the ammonia as well. And then it goes into the Sydney Water Network. There's a pipe that goes across the bottom of Botany Bay and ends up with Erskine and mixes in, or drops into the city tunnel, which is the main feeder for the Sydney Water Network. That's a bit more detail if anyone's interested. 140 megalitre drinking water tank, 12 dual media filters, and then the bits in between that is Backwash filters in the membranes. So the conservation area, like I said, it's 15 hectares. It actually takes up 30% of the whole desalination plant site. So that area there is the desalination plant, but we also look after all of that too. It's part of the arrangement that Sydney Water had when they bought the land for the plant. This area was in a pretty bad way. It had lots of been used as a tip in some respects, just not formally but informally. This area was probably the best of the areas, so Sydney Water agreed that they would try and revegetate that. So we have a bat colony that lives just about here. It's not a huge colony, only about 40 bats at the moment, grey-headed flying foxes. We also have a fairly strict environmental management plan. So we look after the site, the groundwater. The groundwater in the area is very important. So we have all the drainage lines from the plant go through our retention basin and then end up in Fibro Bay, just in here. We do groundwater monitoring as well. So the conservation area contains these four threatened, endangered, ecological communities. So the swamp sclerophyll forest, Sydney freshwater wetlands, Kurnell tree forest, swamp oak pine forest. So we've been working in it for the last 10 years to remove bitterbush, asparagus fern. There's a list of weeds that we've been removing that too long for me to mention. That's the different areas. So we don't actually look after this area here, but these ones, that one corresponds to the freshwater wetlands again. This is where the bat colony is in here. That's the swamp sclerophyll forest. And the swamp oak pine forest is the blue there too. So as you probably know, there was we've lost a lot of animals from there. The biodiversity has reduced. Green and gold bell frog is one animal which has not been recorded on the peninsula since the mid-90s. And as I mentioned, we've got a colony of flying foxes there as well. So one of the things that we're trying to do is reduce the number of introduced species. So we're in a program with the Southern Shire Council to reduce feral cats, foxes, and gambusia. And Ludwigia is another weed that we're trying to get rid of as well. It's seem to have got on top of that, which is good. But the area has suitable habitat also for the wild froglet and the bat. So that's another reason for trying to encourage this area to be revegetated. So we have a vegetation management plan. It's produced every 5 years by a consultant that we employ. That's coming to the end of this 5 year. This 5-year one finishes next year. The vegetation is monitored and they measure quadrats every year and have been able to demonstrate an improvement over the years. They monitor the grey-headed flying foxes every month. Frogs are monitored in the retention basin that we have there. That's done every November and January. As I said, we've got a program running with the council to remove any feral species. So we've got plans to home any orphan grey-headed flying foxes, but the colony needs to be bigger than it is currently before we can do that. So something about 100. So I believe in the past the colony was much bigger. For some reason they've gone, but some have come back, but we haven't got as many back as we had prior to the desal plant being built. There is a lot of development going on quite close to their site that's not involved with us, but we're hoping that that's finished now and hopefully that'll settle down and they may decide that they like the area again. We're hoping to do some translocation of green and golden bell frogs. That some of you may have heard of Arthur White. He was a lecturer at the University of New South Wales, and he's a specialist on that type of frog. So he's helping with that. But that's bureaucratically very difficult. So we're trying to get through that. That may or may not happen. We're controlling a bit of bush on site and planting trees endemic to the peninsula to provide some sustainable fresh leaves for koalas at Sibio. That should happen hopefully next month. So we may be looking for volunteers. So if anyone's interested in coming and having a look around the desal plant, I've planted some trees at the same time. I'll be in touch with Adrian and let you know through that. I think that's probably about it. Yeah. So hopefully that is okay. And if anyone's got any questions, please feel free.
Thanks, Brian. I understand the reverse osmosis is pretty energy intensive. We use a figure on how many kilowatt-hours per 1,000 litres.
I don't know the figures for that, but I did not mention that the plant is actually, when the plant was built, there was a wind farm built at Goulburn to provide energy. Energy is provided, we produce energy for the grid, and whatever the plant uses is offset by that wind farm. It is very intensive, a lot of energy being used for that. I'm sorry, I don't have those figures. I can get them for you, so I can pass it through to Adrian or Kim.
Okay. Robin.
You said the water from the desalination plant is pumped under Botany Bay to join the rest of the Sydney water grid. Where does that join the grid? Where does that water go to?
At Erskineville.
Yeah.
It actually comes out at Kaima, comes out from the bay at Kaima, and then goes along the western bank of the Cooks River, and then along the Princes Highway for some distance, and then does a left, and then hits the city tunnel, which is a north-south, very large underground tunnel that Sydney Water uses to provide water to the rest of the city. The desal plant generally provides water to the eastern suburbs. So once it gets into the pipe at Erskineville, then it sort of distributes around the eastern suburbs. So oddly enough, even though it's based in Kurnell, we don't get any desalinated water here.
The sludge produced in the filtration process, what sort of monitoring is carried out for that? I mean, the water is probably important.
Yeah.
Sludge also does it.
At Woronora, it's monitored for a range of heavy metals. Obviously, there's a lot of iron in there because that's the flocculant that we use, but it also has, from the sandstone, aluminium, manganese. They're the major elements in there. One of the advantages that they tell us it's good is it's got some polydadmac in there which is a polymer. It's used for cleaning swimming pools as well, but it holds water really nicely. So this material, once it's used in landscaping, holds water quite well. It also collects any marine algae or any algae that's in the dam at the time. So it's got some, I guess, live material in there, which has. We also monitors nitrogen and phosphorus, which comes from those algae. But Yeah, as far as the monitoring is concerned, the contractor that takes it does the monitoring for that. We do the monitoring on the sludge itself. So they then mix it with sawdust and green waste. So it's effectively diluted and then composted as well. So it might, once it leaves the plant, it's dried for a year, and then it might take another 6 months of composting before it's fit for landscaping. Yes, Deb.
Deb?
The existing plants is running only the lower level is 50 versus 50 million is the capacity for that to be expanded on that side. What is 250 the expanded one?
No, 250 is what we can do now. 500 is the expanded version. 500.
So what proportion of cities water supply would that?
That's, well, at the moment, well, it'll be 30%. Once it's at 500, it's currently at 15%. At the moment, like I said, we're just idling just to keep the plant ticking over in case it's needed.
So the current plant would be 30% or the expanded?
No, the expanded one will do 30%. So another thing I didn't mention is what happens with the seawater. We bring in, to produce, say, 50 million litres, we take in 100 million litres, and then another 50 million litres goes back out, twice as much salt in it. And the other 50 million litres goes into the network. So the way it's designed, there are risers in the ocean which come out of the base just below, about 100 metres off the cliffs of Kurnell, and they meet the current going south. And the way they've been designed is that they will mix within, I think it's 30 metres of the riser to get back to background salinity levels. And that's the same for, doesn't matter what the flow is going out or coming in for that matter.
What I'm asking is that, the discussion proposals to raise Oregon for flood, flood mitigation, but also as well. Wondering, can you compensate by the current desal or expanding building another desal?
Yeah, you'd think so. There is room there, as I said, for expansion. But we're talking, in fact, we were expecting the expansion to go ahead until it started raining. And then that was put on the back burner very quickly. But there's space there to do the expansion, and it would probably be a 2-year build, I guess, from the time it's decided. Go ahead. Oh, that's Woronora. Woronora is about 96, I think, at the moment. Well, like I said, sometimes the rain seems to go around Woronora. It's a small catchment, and I guess with the environmental flows that we have now too, the dam hasn't been full and spilled for a long time. The dam releases, even during dry weather, it's about 4 megalitre a day environmental discharge. But the way it works, from my memory, is that 50% of what falls above a certain amount goes through and is released into the Woronora River, and 50% is collected. So whereas in the past, prior to, I think it was 2001 when that was introduced, the dam would have filled up much more quickly. But because of the environmental flows, takes a lot longer, needs a lot more rain for the dam to fill up these days.
Okay, Sonia, last one.
Yeah, well, lighting in the catchment, we've seen the photos of Woronora River with the big cracks in the riverbed. Would that be part of the reason that Woronora Dam doesn't fill up as much as the others?
Yeah, that was thought about a while ago. It's not something that I'm familiar with because that's way up in the catchment. I personally don't think so. I think the amount of any water going into the dam or going down into I presume it goes down to the mines, would quickly fill up. It's sort of inconsequential compared to the volume of the dam. But it certainly could release some metals into the water from that. but there's already metals in the water from the natural environment. There's already aluminium and manganese. They're fairly high concentrations in the dam anyway. So it's not something I'm really familiar with, but it's, I guess, gut feeling is that probably not. I don't think it would have much effect, if any at all. It certainly looks bad, but it's not something that I think. I can't see where it would go, to be honest. I mean, it's all well upstream. That particular stream that it's on, I don't think is the major inflow to the dam anyway. But, you know, it's a risk that probably should never have happened. You know, they should never have mined to that point where it does break the substrate. But I don't think in this instance it's making much of a difference.
Okay, I think we'll call it.
I'm happy to talk to anyone afterwards.
I'm sure there'll be people interested in the revegetation project.
It's a regeneration.
Regeneration. Yeah. So if you let Adrian or myself know about that,
sure. Okay.
Pass it on. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. And I'll hand over to Deb to.
So, Paul, I'd like to just give this little gift as a thank you for the presentation tonight. Colin and I met in our university days doing zoology at University of New South Wales. Inspired me to get interested in the marine environment and set me off eventually on diving for some kind of year. But we're really united in other prayers on Lake Elliot this year.
Looking forward to it.
But I'm sure that you see the plans now, we're interested in this regeneration project.
Yeah. I'll let you and Adrian know, and we can get something for that.
You're welcome to start with our general business section, if you like.
Great. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Colin. Just a reminder to everybody, especially those out in Zoom land, if they've been able to hear us, hopefully for this second talk, that most of our talks are now on YouTube. They've been going onto our YouTube channel for the last 12 months or so. So if you miss out on any of these, you can catch up with them through the YouTube channel. Just go to our website and you can log into it from there. Okay, general business. Campaigns. The issue of the former Oatley Bowling Club site, master plan and plan of management. You would have heard a bit about that through the newsletters and through the last 2 or 3 meetings. I've given an update on that project or campaign.